Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Kinks and Beatles Daily Deep Dive. I'm your host, Tony Fry. This is episode 217. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for listening. Thank you for all your support. If you're new to the podcast, there's a lot of episodes for you to catch up on, so swing by herohabit.com. You can find a full listing of every song we've covered so far, and it's all separated by artists and then by albums, so it's easy to find your favorites. And we obviously have many, many more to go. You can also find out where to follow us on social media and how you can support this podcast financially to help us keep it moving into the future. Also, I want to mention that we are now on the TikTok. If you look for Hero Habit on TikTok, I'm going to be there. Once we get to 1,000 followers, if that day ever comes, I would like to do, like, not every episode, but maybe once a week, I'm going to do a TikTok live where I'll just be filming myself recording an episode, and you can interact and ask questions and stuff like that, and we can incorporate that into the episodes. So if you're on TikTok, give us a follow over there so that we can get that 1,000 goal. I'm not holding my breath because that seems like a lot, but that's what we need to be able to do the live events. All right, so today we're talking about Run of the Mill by George Harrison. This is going to end our look at All Things Must Pass for a while. We're only going to do the first disc for now, and then we'll come back to the second half of the album later. But I'd like to get to some Beatles or some of the other solo stuff. It was released November 27th, 1970 as the side 2 closer on All Things Must Pass. And the song is a direct reaction to the business dealings at Apple, where Harrison seems to share his regret, his disappointment, his confusion at times, with how his band has dissolved into fighting, or, like in the case of Lennon, just disregard. And the lyrics are beautiful, and George himself has said he felt it was the first song he'd ever written that read like a poem. And it really does. It's a really lovely lyric, and we'll talk about that later. In a lot of ways, I've been dreading covering this song because the timing of this song makes Here Comes the Sun look like a pretty basic song, which it isn't. So bear with me. This is going to get real heavy on music theory. I'm going to try my best to describe it. This is one of those things that's a lot easier to explain if I have it on a whiteboard and I can kind of chart it out for you. So I'm going to do my best, but this is going to be heavy on music theory. And I'm also going to preface this with the fact that I wholeheartedly disagree with the way the official sheet music is written. So if you disagree with my analysis, I'd like to hear it, because this is one of those things. I mean, technically the official sheet music is correct, but sometimes there's a couple correct ways you can write some music, and it's not always what is correct on paper, but how it needs to feel. And if I was writing this out for a band that I was going to perform with, I would write it out differently, maybe a little bit more complicated to look at, but it would make more sense to the musicians. So anyway, to my ears, this song begins in standard 4/4 with a halftime feel. Now, the official sheet music I'm looking at lists this as cut time, which is technically the same thing. But if you listen to how the drums are being placed, it makes more sense to count this as a halftime 4. Now, the difference between halftime and cut time is a time signature, 2/2, 2 beats per measure, and the half note is getting the beat. And there's a reason that they're saying that it's got to be in cut time, and that's because of the next measure we're going to talk to. But what I'm saying is, you, the listener, so that's cut time. In a halftime feel, you, the listener, are going to listen to the hi-hat, and it's going to sound like it's playing eighth notes really slow. It's going to sound like it's going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2. And it's going to sound like the snare's hitting on 2 and 4, just like it would in 4/4. But when you do a halftime feel, what you're actually doing with the hi-hat or the ride cymbal, wherever you're doing your subdivision, is you're playing just the downbeats, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And then if you put the snare on beat 3, Now, all of a sudden, instead of going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the exact same time. It's the exact same tempo, but because you're making that snare drum further apart by putting it on 3 every bar, it makes the whole thing feel slower. So it's a halftime feel. All right, so that means that the eighth notes are actually twice as quick as the hi-hat is playing. All right, so I'm going to try to do a little percussion on my guitar. So you've got 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So if that's your quarter note, even though it feels like an eighth note, that's actually the quarter note. That means that your eighth note is going to cut that in half. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So instead of counting what the drum is doing, I want you to break it down to the other subdivision, which is basically 1E and a. Right? It's going to feel like 16th notes. But this is the pulse that goes through the entire song. Okay? The eighth note in this song is the most important part of the meter, because they're the only constant. If you're going to analyze it the way I'm analyzing, actually, if you analyze it the way the official sheet music does, it's also you have to find a constant. But in this case, it's the eighth note that's the constant. So everything else that changes in the meter revolves around these notes, this subdivision. So after 2 bars of a halftime 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? It feels like 1 because it's in halftime, but it's actually 2. We go into 4 bars of 3/8. And you can count this as a single bar of 12/8 if you want. It doesn't really matter, but the structure of the melody feels like individual bars of 3 because you can really count it in 1. You're going 1, 1, 1, 1, right? So that's what makes me feel like it's actually 4 individual bars of 3/8. But that part doesn't really matter. If that's what you're going to argue with me, if you agree with everything else, but you think it should be in 12/8, don't even bother writing in. I totally buy it. That's really not that important. What the official sheet music has is it's written in 3/4, and I just don't think that's the case. So since we're subdividing the eighth notes, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You notice how that eighth note stays the same, right? So that's why I said you got to make that your constant. Then there's a bar of 7/4. So now we're going 1, 2. Whoops. I tried to do that from memory, and I don't remember the chords. That's right. So we're going 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, and 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're doing a bar of 7 or 3 and a 4, depending on how you want to count it. And then we're back into the halftime. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So that's the verse. Now, where it gets a little bit more complicated is during the bridges. There's really no chorus here, so I'm just counting it as verse and bridge. You got 2 bridges here. The first bridge, he ends each line on a bar of 7. Okay, so we've got the no one around you can carry the weight for you. Right, that's the bar of 7. Okay, then the second time he plays that part, he doesn't play 7. He plays it as a regular 4/4. But since he's established it in 7 and the first time through, it's a little jarring, and it feels like he's scrambling to put more words in, which he sort of is, but he's adding a beat to the phrase to accommodate that. So the most normal part of this song which is just a bridge that's completely in 4/4, sounds a little bit off. And only George Harrison could make that sound off because he's established it in 7 prior. Right? It's not off. It's totally standard. If he had done that from the beginning, you wouldn't even notice. But because he had taken that one beat away at the end of the phrases prior, it sounds off. But it's a cool little effect. And this isn't the first time, and it definitely won't be the last time that Harrison messes with timing in such a way. And it's a testament to his band that everyone hangs on so tightly, because these can be tough to navigate, especially when they're not consistent through the song, which we just said the bridges weren't. And you're dealing with bars of 7 and going back and forth between compound and complex time and all that kind of stuff. It's tough. Luckily for the players, though, the chord changes aren't as complex as Harrison was known to compose. For the most part, the bridge is a simple 1-6, 1-6, 4-6, 5. And when I say simple, I only mean that it's all chords in the key of D. There's no naughty chords, as he would call them, and nothing borrowed from other keys. It's not a standard sequence by any stretch, but they're all chords that musicians are used to seeing in the key of D. So we've just got the 1, 6, back to 1, to 4, 6, 5. So you got a strong D tonic there. Okay, for the bridge, he moves to E minor, which is the 2. So we're still not out of key of D. It's a little unusual to switch to the 2 for a bridge. Usually the musician will switch to the 4. That's a very, very, very common thing. So or the relative minor, something like that. So just going to the 2 is kind of odd. Only because this verse never resolves to D. Right? He's not doing like a 2-5-1 sequence or anything. He's just going to 2. So that's cool. And then we have the first borrowed chord of the song. No one around you. It's that major chord, that F sharp major. All right? It should be F sharp minor if we were going to stay in the key of D. But that just does not sound as good. George made the right call. So we have a major 3 chord, or basically another way to call it is a 5 of 6. So it's the 5th chord of the 6th chord. And he follows that chord with the logical 6. Anytime you have a 5 of something, in this case 5 of 6, it's safe to bet that it'll resolve to the chord it's the 5 of, right? So a 5 of 6 will resolve to 6. A 5 of 4 will resolve to the 4, right? Because it's usually these chords are used to like take you a little bit away from the tonic, but not too far away from the tonic. And you want an easy way to get back, and they naturally resolve to those chords that they are the 5 of. Now, it's usually a safe bet. It's not really a safe bet with George. We talked about a deceptive cadence he used a couple songs ago, where he hits the 5 and then he goes just as far away from where he should resolve as he possibly could. But in general, if you see that, it's a safe bet. So then he takes that 6 chord, right? We've resolved to the 6, so we've got 2, 5 of 6 to 6. It's a nice chord progression. And then he turns it major. All right? And he's using it kind of in the same way he would use a diminished 7th chord, right? Which makes this a 5 of 2. Can you guess where that resolves? Yes, it resolves to the 2 chord. So he goes from that B7 to the E minor, which is where this bridge began, right? So in a lot of ways, he's establishing E minor as the tonic chord on paper. But if you're listening to it, it almost sounds like the B7 is actually the resolution, right? It sounds that sounds like it's resolved, right? It's not hanging there, but it is hanging because it's a 5-7 chord. And those hang. And then he goes to the 4 chord. And then we're back to D. So it's a little ambiguous when you hear it. Partially, I think, because the uneven measures warp your sense of where you are in relation to the home key. It's very easy to feel resolutions when everything's in 4/4, and it's like, you've got this da 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 dun da da dun da 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 dun, right? But it's not as easy when you've got da da dun dun da dun 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 da dun 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 dun, right? You've got all these like extended bars or half bars or switches from cut time to 6/8 or whatever like that. So I think part of that adds to the ambiguity. But it all works beautifully on paper, and none of the chords are too far from the original D major. He doesn't shift very far. And I think it's worth pointing out, while we're talking about what he's doing, his beautiful acoustic guitar playing on this. In a lot of ways, I would have preferred just his guitar and the vocals. But of course, we've got Phil Spector producing this to muck it all up. And in his defense, he mostly leaves the track alone, and avoids a crazy wall of sound production. There are some horns that seem a little out of place, a lot like the horns on All Things Must Pass the song. I would have rather had that part covered by the Hammond organ or maybe a slide guitar. It really takes away from the relaxed roots rock feel of this tune to have a mid-range trumpet and sax playing in unison, cutting through the mix. And, had this been a George Martin production, that might have been covered with strings or a less abrasive horn, like a French horn or like a mid-range trombone that's got a little bit more mellow tone to it. There's a cool outtake of this track, Take 36, that appears on the 50th anniversary edition of this album. And on that take, a dual electric guitar part plays some pretty busy lines. It has a line that opens it, and then in between the verses, he fills in a lot, and there's not a lot of room in between these verses. And it's a harmonized guitar line, so you've got two guitars playing in harmony in these short little fragments. And it sounds more like an outtake from Layla, the Derek and the Dominoes album. But in that context of that take, the horns make a lot more sense. Because it's a little bit edgier, it's a little bit more rock, that version, than the version that was released. So those horns make sense, and and they're deeper in the mix, which who knows how they would have ended up if Spector would have actually used that take. But in the mix that they did for the reissue, they're a lot deeper in the mix, and it makes more sense. And that's a fun listen. It doesn't compare to the final release version of the track, in my opinion, but it is fun to listen to it. And then all of this, and we haven't even talked about the lyrics, with lines like, tomorrow when you rise, another day for you to realize me or send me down again. And as the days stand up on end, you've got me wondering how I lost your friendship, but I see it in your eyes. It's pretty easy to read all of this as a pointed conversation with either John or Paul. I don't think it's a stretch. I feel like the lines I just read are kind of geared more towards Paul, but the line, which way will you turn while feeling that our love's not your concern, it's you that decides, feels kind of directed at John, who had pretty much clocked out emotionally by that point, at least as far as George was concerned. It's a really beautiful lyric, and again, puts George right up there with the best songwriters in rock, in my opinion. Definitely one of the most complex songwriters. You don't see a lot of guys messing with time the way that he did. Or using, this wasn't a great example, or using the chord palette that he did in general, even though this is a simpler one. What are your thoughts on this tune? I'd like to hear them. Give me an email, kinksandbeats@herohabit.com, or call me, 925-494-1739, and argue your interpretation of the timing of this song. I'm interested to hear it. And again, we have a subreddit now at Hero Habit. We have the TikTok. We have the Instagrams. We have the Tweeters. We have the Facebook groups. Go to all of it. There's different. I try to post different content on each one, so it's something for different on every platform. So follow them all. Find Hero Habit or Kinks and Beats on all the platforms, and say hello. All right, I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you can leave ratings and reviews for podcasts. And stay safe out there, everyone.